Good evening, good afternoon.
No, not yet. Wait, too early. Go now. Go now.
You cue me and what?
Oh my God,
This is the show about communication, and this is a good start.
Oh, that was so great.
That was the opposite of a good start. That was not good communication. That wasn't even communicate. No.
So we're demonstrating how not to communicate to begin with, but yeah, nobody's
We are
seen it
live?
yet. We are live. Yes, we are live. Yeah.
So do I start now?
Yeah, about now. Still
Okay.
no one watching us. We're good.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to Raising Excellence, one of the most valuable hours of your day. I'm Michael, the MC for today's adventure, and today's show is Communication, the Art of. Today is Thursday, so we'll have a logical fallacy segment. Does anybody want to volunteer what that logical fallacy is?
I can. It's guilt by association. I'm ready with it. Oh, I can even show it. There you go. you
And
guys.
we're introducing our host, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator, is
Thank you. Nice to
give
be
us an
here.
answer.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about the fallacy in a minute.
Okay. Uh, Going on with our host today, our trauma consultant, Willow.
Hi, everyone.
Deirdre, our development strategist.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here.
And finally, Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Hi there, glad to be with you.
And if you are viewing live and have a question or a comment, please feel free to put that input in there and we will try and address it as the show goes on. And just as a reminder, next week, Dennis is going to be giving us a week-long investigation of finding freedom and might even throw something in about how to cook a rat.
No, not how to cook a rat.
How to cook too.
That was
Yes, leftovers. Just dry that out.
Uh,
Jerky rat.
I'm
So-
telling you, that sounds like some valuable stuff.
So I'm
Go
not
ahead.
sure how we're starting with this communication show. Are we communicating effectively?
We're trying.
We're communicating.
We're communicating.
We're tossing out
we're-
ideas. And
It's like an orc pit.
Laughing at each other. That's communication, right?
That's communication. All right. So what are we
It is.
talking? What are we talking about today, Michael?
Well, communication, the art of, but just in general to explain the concept that we've got going on for the past few days, and what I've been leading us with is a really a kind of a two-part concept show, where the first show is about identifying a topic and making people more aware of it. And the second show being demonstrating skills and solutions to that and how to use them to be a much more valuable, understanding and utilization of what skills people have and how to make much more out of the circumstances that they have. But today, the art of communication, or communication, the art of, I want to begin with, the circumstance that we have right now, which is people's communication skills are, on the average, bad and headed for worse. And I'll just point out a couple different things. Isolation. People are isolated these days, and these days really are getting isolated. The technology offers poor substitutes for communication. Third is people are emotionally triggered. There's a lot of emotions tied to words these days, and just saying words can send people into a tizzy. And then finally, there is a multitude of fear and shame around the world and in societies and communities that hinder people from trying to communicate better. So with that said, what does
How do we
everybody else
fix
think
this?
about that?
How do we make it better? How do we communicate openly with love?
Well, let's just
I
talk
know what
about
it
those
is.
things.
So
Let's
it's the
not know how to
love.
fix them, but I mean, how have you seen these things? Have you seen these things in your
Yes.
experiences?
Have the listeners seen these things? I'd like to see a couple comments there. And what have we seen? What have you seen?
So you're
Right.
saying
You want to talk about
you're saying
isolation, for example? But go ahead,
cell
Dennis.
phones and internet did not improve our communication? I thought that's what brings the world together.
I think
Well,
it's
I mean, I
50-50.
think the technology is offering like a substitute in regard to communicating. So, like like most people say, a lot of communication is nonverbal, and things like texting and email and all this kind of stuff is not helping that.
Most definitely, yeah, I agree. So it's it's something that I can perceive in my day by day life. People not looking in your face again, people shying away from looking somebody in the eye. Um, and like I don't take myself out, even like the use of words, the loss of words. Like if you read books that are like 50, 100 years old, it becomes difficult for some people to even to properly understand the words that are being used. So of course these are natural things that language to a certain extent changes like over the years, but then that entire words are being taken out of dictionaries, for example, that the sense of words is being twisted. In the case here in Germany, our language is heavily influenced, especially after the Second World War, which is I think a whole theme by itself. How people here have been, you can say, indoctrinated or brainwashed to an extent, and how American culture, especially, even through language, also has been introduced and forced, through music, through media, through commercials, through TV series. So it's it is something that I can observe on a day-by-day basis, that language is being changed, the meaning of words is being turned around, and people are not even able to communicate in a meaningful way. And if they communicate, if I look at the TV series that my children are wanting to watch, if you if you look if
Yes.
you look at the kind of conversation that's being thrown around there, it's not even full phrases or sentences again. It's just like some buzzwords or some some phrases and some short rhyme, but it doesn't really mean anything. So that's kind of frightening.
Yeah.
In a way.
The language changes all the time. I mean, it's been purposely changed a lot.
Have you ever noticed that it changes at critical ages? So a critical age is in your teens, and have you noticed that teens generally have are flooded with buzzwords, and so they continue to use those buzzwords. They like get imprinted because it's at the time when your brain's kind of truncating itself, and so what happens is whatever's used more frequently stays.
I think it's
And
sorry.
and then yeah, I'll finish in a second. And then so I don't know if you guys noticed, so I talk to my neighbors. They're varying ages, most of them are geriatrics, and they talk differently. So one lady, the lady who ran over my electricity box, she's like was born in like the early she's like 80, over like 87 years old, 86 years old. So she talks differently. She's very British, and I find it really interesting having conversations with her. A lot of people can't because they can't hold that older dialect with her. But then when I was growing up, I always grew up with things like bodacious and tubular and things related that way, and dude and everything. Now, if I were to say those words to her, she wouldn't know what I was talking about. And the same, if I say those words to my younger brother who's 20, he looks at me like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And I have to think. I'm like, a bodacious person, a fit person, because fit is now what is the term used for somebody that is attractive. So that, and then that, what happens is, because I can't talk to her, I can't talk to my younger brother, there's a cohort kind of issue happening where, oh, well, I can't even talk to those people, they're just too old, or I can't talk to those people, they're just too young. Do you see, like there's something very manipulative here?
A division between generations through language.
I think a lot of it heavily relies on the chemical release you get when you involve or engage in colloquial language. It's like When you go to your parents' house, you've got certain phrases that if you were to say around anyone else, they'd look at you like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. But within your family or your little friend group, they get it. It's like speaking their brand or their dialect. Um, that connection, that interaction, and having someone understand what you say without actually um, having to go too far into it, like it makes the conversation easier, and I think probably produces a chemical release in your brain. I think that has a lot to do with it because a lot of these teens, like, look how we look back on like old music from that age. It's nostalgic. It has a good feeling, and I can recognize a lot of the music I used to listen to was crap, but it still makes me feel good when I listen to it. I think it's very similar with the language, and that's why it's been targeted and polluted because it's such a powerful tool, because it conveys an idea. I mean, the memes are what we're talking about. It's just a different, like evolution, evolve. I can't.
Evolution.
A different way to communicate, like those buzzwords that Dennis was talking about. And the reason I noticed it is because when I was doing my last exams for university, I met these, I think they were 17, and they were at university studying science degrees, and they were homeschooled, and they just talked like grown-ups. It was the most flattering, wonderful conversation that I've ever had, and they were 17, and it got me thinking that, hang on, and I asked them that, gee, that you talk so well, what happened? And they just weren't allowed TV ever. They were still engaged with their world. Their parents were very make sure that they didn't
Isolated.
kind of isolate them. Yeah, so they got out and everything. They just didn't watch TV at all.
There's
Can't be
a
bad.
there's a the quality of communication. I would argue depends on the awareness from the one who is receiving the communication as well as from the one who is, uttering the words, or not even, sometimes communication can be beyond words, of course, as well. And then I would argue that there are different qualities, just as if you come from a holistic perspective, like I keep on saying, like we're emotional, physical, intellectual, and also spiritual beings. So if you're aware, you can pick up the quality of the communication that is being transferred to you, whether it's like purely a physical thing, like a body language, or whether it's, through the voice. You can sense if somebody's talking with emotion, if somebody is purely coming from, for example, from an emotional state, and being overwhelmed or being run by emotion alone. If it's just like a mental quality, if it's just the mind speaking, or if it's only like, let's say, like a physical expression that's being used to transfer a message, or also if all those aspects are being used consciously in a way to transfer a message which is, beyond just the emotion, beyond just the physical, beyond just the mental. But if those qualities that we possess are actually being used to express and to communicate something, or from a space that is beyond just that, and I feel then that is really like a higher quality of communication. And if we have this awareness, then we can pick it up. But if we have that awareness, we also can communicate from that space. So it doesn't just become like a mental blurb, or if it's just like from an emotional point. But if it's something where we actually use those qualities in order to communicate, to like from a higher place, so to say. So then it's not our communication, but it's something that's communicated through us.
Let's talk about fear and shame a little.
Well-
How is communication hindered by
I have.
that kind of stuff?
I think I have an answer or something that will tie into it. I was going to mention how communication can be incredibly hindered when you have been dealing with a traumatic event or multiple traumatic events. Because I noticed like a similar situation. An example would be having a spouse or a partner, and they say or do something that makes you really upset, angry, scared, whatever the feeling is, and then we automatically say, "Well, you made me feel that way." Um, taking like that's a reaction that often gets in the way because you're labeling it, you feel the feeling, and you already think you know what it means. You think that that person is feeling these things towards you, or that something is going to happen, and you react. Uh, Holding that space will allow you to see that a lot of times you're definitely picking up on something. You're picking up on a change in mood or expression, but unless you hold that space and you don't automatically react to it, you don't get to see it. You just automatically label it and then you overlook it. And it brought me back to a quote I saw the other day that said, I think Mike actually might have been the one who shared it, where it said, I think 90% of the problem with communication is the assumption that it has already been had.
That's a good one. Did you share that?
I did reshare it, but I
Well,
don't remember. Oh,
I don't think it was me, but yeah, that's a good one.
you've been sharing some good stuff on Facebook, Willow. Should share them on our channel too.
Hasn't she?
Yeah.
My favorite one was, which one was it? Oh, no, now it's just like gone. I had it sitting there and I was just about to say it too. I was so
did
excited.
it have a picture?
Yeah, it was a picture.
Anyway, we'll share the best ones from Willow on our Raising Excellence Facebook channel.
Feel free to share any. I have not, because I can get a little heated sometimes, and not everyone is prepared to have their stuff thrown at them sometimes. So I try to offer people the option of if you want some real advice, if you want me to be honest with you, I do this with my friends. I'm like, you want my real honest uncut opinion, or do you want me to kind of soften this a little bit and try to explain it a little bit easier? Because having that option, most people actually choose to have oh no, I want to hear it all, and then they take it a lot easier because it's their choice.
Oh, by the way, shout out to Bob and Kelly who are watching. I saw that earlier. I was going to break in, but
Howdy, guys. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for spending your valuable time with us. I feel that fear is definitely a limitation in many ways, and so for communication as well. So fear is limiting us in our expression, and fear is also limiting us in perceiving or taking in a communication. So because fear is based in the past, is based on mind activity, and we paint something in our mind that might not even be the reality in the moment, and then we don't perceive that the message itself is maybe meant or comes from a totally different place. And I was remembered that experiencing the which is also a limitation, the lack of words and of ability of verbally expressing your feelings and expressing your thoughts or where you are right now is such that was such a huge thing for me, working with children, especially working with traumatized people as well. And it took me some while to really figure out that. And when I really started to perceive that, well, the questions and the way I was talking, they could not perceive it, not because I didn't speak their language well, but the words the questions I was asking, they were understood on a physical level, so to say. But the children didn't have, they were first not accustomed because they were never allowed and they were never asked about their opinions about certain things, and so they were not accustomed of expressing themselves in that way. But also they did not even have the words to do so. So I had to go way back and figure out ways of how, and that was talking in a conversation, because then through capoeira I would give them different venues then of expressing themselves through music, through movement and different other things, but also the expressing yourself and talking up for yourself, it became so important because much of the aggression and much of the violence is stemmed into a lack, or comes from a lack of communication, from a lack of expressing your feelings and from communicating them to your social environment. And that was a huge thing for me to recognize that, and then to see how much it limits people.
Isn't that what makes us human, our ability to do that?
To communicate?
for me to communicate, this is what I was saying a few weeks ago when I said it's unbelievable that we can communicate so well, because I'm essentially getting my inner world and I'm putting it in, moving my muscles in my mouth in a certain way in which you can hear it, and then you're taking that and then putting it in your inner world and interpreting it, and then like doing the same thing back. That's beautiful. And the ability to do that correctly is fundamental, because how can I can't survive by myself without you guys. I can't understand myself without you. And that's how fundamental communication is. And so just by what Dennis was saying, it's that ability that if I'm thinking of TV, really inappropriate TV shows I don't get the kids to watch because I know it's just garbage on how human beings react, is that it's almost just like, oh, well, I'm going to bite, I'm going to say some nasty snide comment and, watch this person feel bad, and then they're going to bite back and do something snarky. And it's just like, well, that's not communication. How am I supposed to effectively do the things that I need to do in my life if all I'm doing is just being nasty to everybody? Who's going to want to help me?
Well, that's where the culture of excellence comes in, right? When we're excellent to each other, we can be the best humans we can be.
Well, and I think a lot of us never had the chance to, like Dennis was saying, to express ourselves. Not just from like trauma. Trauma makes it harder to express yourself, but in reality, a lot of the suppression of how to communicate what you're feeling is like taught out of you from a very, very young age. If you cry, if you make a scene, if you embarrass your parents, at the very least, you're going to be talked to in a stern, you're going to embarrass them, and they're going to let you know that, you embarrassed them. Worst case scenario, you get, them hitting their children in the middle of the aisle or taking them to the car and hitting them. None of that teaches you to express yourself. And then all of a sudden, as you're an adult, everyone's like, yeah, express how you feel. You should have it figured out by now. And it's like, well, no, that's not how that works.
And the missed opportunity is that you've missed that. It's meant to be a comfortable space to practice that all in, to practice that boundary pushing. Oh, okay, that mommy looks really embarrassed right now, and she said she feels really embarrassed, and that was probably taking it too far. Okay, all right, maybe there's a better way. Mommy's taught me a better way. Okay, all right, I'm going to try this out and see if it works. It's that I don't know. As a parent, I make sure that I do my best to make sure I have a comfortable space for my kids to practice being themselves, to find out who themselves are, who they are. Because as an adult, I don't have anyone I can practice on. I don't have that safe space.
By the way, just a quick interjection. I was informed that our live streaming on Discord is a little bit problematic. So I just want to remind everybody on Discord that you can go to class announcements and click on the YouTube link, and you should be able to see us there. It may be less problematic. Anyway, PSA.
I think I forgot to post the YouTube link today.
I was thinking about Sorry, no, go ahead. You're fine.
I was just going to say, like taboo topics, like when you enter into a conversation at work or, in club or wherever you're at, and there's things that you probably shouldn't say. You'd like to say, but you can't say. Is that fear? Is that shame? What is that's holding you back from
I would say fear.
Do you know what the details of shame are? Do you guys know what the details of shame are? So shame is a body mechanism so that you guys don't want to hurt me. I'm going to show my body's going to emulate shame so that you don't hurt me. That's what the mechanism is there for.
So I actually heard a different definition. It was the difference between shame and guilt, and why children are not equipped to handle shame. They can't. Shame means there is something inherently wrong with you. Like something that you are doing wrong that is not okay. You need to change that to live. That's what it makes you feel. That's why it's so intense. And that's why children don't know how to handle that, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're trying to figure things out. Children should not feel shame because they're not necessarily responsible for what.
I was thinking, what would it look like? To me, would it look like a dog putting its tail between its legs?
I mean, you described it, and every time I think of it, I can feel it in my body. My whole body just, like, I'm so
But it's
sorry.
certainly
I
one
don't
of the most
deserve.
powerful emotions.
I'm sorry, I don't deserve you. Yes,
I'm sorry.
So notice what you did with your body. You took as little space as possible when you were describing the feeling of shame.
It's like as close as you can get to fetal position, because it's just the only thing I can do is protect myself, and if that means changing, then that's what I have to do. Guilt also induces change, but I think it's not as harsh of a feeling, because guilt means you have done something wrong. You have made a mistake.
Doesn't guilt mean wait? Doesn't guilt mean you're fixated on having done something wrong? Because feeling sorry is the feeling that you feel when you apologize, but guilt is something that lasts beyond that.
Guilt is also something that can be installed, right? So you didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but you're made believe that you did something wrong, which might be totally even there. And that's something to that entire societies are run by that, by a feeling of guilt that's installed in them. So that's being used to control people big time, to install a feeling of guilt, and in order to manipulate them and to put them in a position where they feel guilty, and then because of that feeling of guilt, which they might not even have anything to do with, but they feel guilty because their great grandparents did something that was so wrong that it still wears off on them somehow. But then if you really look at it, even the word Schuld in German, it's very interesting, like, to go back to it has to do with church, but I think that would take the conversation to a whole different level. But there's the how you say in English, the original sin. That's like a biblical thing where guilt comes in for the first time, so it goes way back to that, and since then historically guilt has been used as one of the major tools, I feel, to manipulate not only individuals but also peoples.
I'd like to answer Mike's question, because I've run into this problem over and over again. I'm a very what's the word, outgoing person, especially since I moved out of my parents' house, which were very strict. Both of them were very strict in different ways. I kind of went a little crazy, and I don't like when people tell me I can't do things. It just makes it worse. So I have often found myself at my work or at some other place where, like, I know I should keep my mouth shut and I don't.
Isn't that a Sagittarius thing?
Yeah. I can clearly tell, though, that it's not out of shame or guilt that I do this. It's out of self-preservation. It's I really don't need to get fired unexpectedly when I don't have anything prepared. Like, I don't deserve to be a smartass today because I have not fully prepared to quit this job and move on to the next one, as you should if you're going to
be a smartass.
Take responsibility for the things that you're going to say. You need to take responsibility for the consequences, whether they are fair, good, bad, like whatever's going to come your way. You kind of need to be able to respond to it. That's your responsibility.
Well, but isn't that also a reflection of poor communication? Like the fact that you can't communicate what you feel to somebody else without them basically holding your job over your head says to me that it's a poor environment for communication. Don't you think that's true?
Yeah,
absolutely. But I see it happen I worked at a group home for mentally and physically disabled adults, and I often had to just completely skip over the fact that I smoke cannabis, that it is incredibly helpful. And I even had to be careful with how much, some of our clients who were very high functioning, they'd start asking questions and repeating things that was on the news. And they'd say things like, oh, that marijuana, that kills people. It'll kill your brain cells. And I'm like, well, that's not entirely true. And then I'd get my manager look at me like, how dare you even acknowledge that there might be a medical use? This is a home for mentally disabled adults. Like, you can't put that stress. I'm like, they're asking a question. I'm not allowed to answer it, honestly. Or am I just supposed to pretend that I'm, the good fairy and everything's good and rainbows and, oh, look, Oreo's here, go get that. Like, I'm not a babysitter. I'm trying to help people.
That's the standard of that's the restrictions of regulation. So to avoid the institution being sued, there's only you're restricted on how you communicate with your clients.
Fear-based.
And now I have a client. I'm basically doing similar work, and I have a client that I go around every day with. And trust me, there are some really hard questions that she asked me. We passed basically a church group, not protesting, but they were like out there talking to people about other options other than abortion. And she just flat out asked me, she was like, hey, what's abortion? And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to like explain what this word means. And, I'm actually allowed to do that. And I really value that trust and the communication between my clients, guardians and my client, where I actually can have that communication and convey real information so that she doesn't get the wrong impression or that other people don't get the wrong impression.
That whole holistic communication, that's because you clearly said that's the arrangement you made, that you're her friend, and that is what a friend would do.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to move on to the next segment because we're pushing time here.
Alrighty.
So the next segment is how to improve communication, and I've got some key points, and I guess I'll just go through the key points, and then we can touch on the ones that people feel the strongest about. So the first one is, in getting better communication, number 1, take a deep breath. Number 2, acknowledge suffering. Number 3, ask questions, and most importantly, listen. Number 4 is be honest and compassionate with yourself as well as others. 5, be gentle with people.
Hang on, what was 4? Can you go back to 4?
Number 4 was be honest and compassionate
Okay.
with yourself and others. Number 6 is it's a practice, so practice. And finally, work together. So does any of those pop up in anybody's mind as being particularly useful and effective communication?
Yes. Can you say, was it number 2, the trauma one?
Acknowledge suffering.
Acknowledging suffering.
Yeah. So that I've gone back over the book, and so what they're talking about is just not just acknowledging my suffering, but acknowledging.
Yeah, what
Which
book?
book are you referring to?
This is The Art of Communication by Thich Nhat Hanh.
I have a feeling this was mentioned before and I wasn't paying attention.
You were. It wasn't, but it was in the chat. The monk Thich Nhat chat. That's he's a very interesting person.
Sorry, Deirdre, I didn't mean to.
He's an activist.
Mm-hmm.
A peaceful activist. And I think he did like really like not just like peaceful activist. No, like huge demonstrations. So acknowledging my suffering, so that's fine. I can acknowledge my suffering, but then to acknowledge somebody else's suffering,
especially when the jerk is pissing you off. That's not it. Yeah,
that's hard.
It's really hard to. I was gonna say this is an ego problem. It's really hard to acknowledge your suffering and not take action to stop it. Especially for someone who has been in an abusive situation and they have learned that they have that control. Oh, dear God. it's hard to stop when I've even noticed it when I've done it myself, and I'm like, I know that I just want control over this situation. But it's really hard when I feel like when I get that feeling that I am right and they are wrong and they are the reason I am suffering. I want to stop it like any normal
How
human
are
being.
they a reason you're suffering, though?
Because a lot of times when you have the reaction, like they have the green tie on, like we've used this metaphor before where it's like the trigger. They say something in a certain tone, or they say a certain set of words that you didn't realize you've heard before. They wear certain clothes, and all of a sudden you're feeling the same things. Like maybe they're wearing that same color shirt or tie while they're also trying to hold you accountable for something. It may feel way more intense, and you have to be honest with yourself and acknowledge your suffering. That leads into the other one of asking questions, because it's okay to say, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling afraid right now. Do I need to be? Is that something that I'm actually like, am I picking up on the right things? I'm not blaming you. I just wanted to know. And this goes with all the
So
other questions you have to ask. You're like, am I really upsetting you? Did I say something wrong? I just wanted to know.
That's the one thing that he in the book is saying. What were the words? There's words. Oh, I remember what the picture is now. From I said, oh no, I'll remember. I remember what it is, and it's perfect timing. That's great. So what it is it's a picture, and I can't remember the picture, but it's saying I have a hurt, and then I heard that in the book. It's saying I can't remember how it says, but I love that it's saying, no, I have a sad. I love that.
Yeah.
because you're also not identifying yourself with the sad. It's not I am, it's I have.
You are feeling. Yeah, it makes it temporary. It makes it in your mind, because it's not attached to you. It has the possibility to leave, and that alone is calming.
It's the opposite of when people say my diabetes or my hypertension. They really embody that disease and really embrace it within their body, as opposed to saying the diabetes or the hypertension.
Yeah. See, I would say that that's called dereflection, meaning that I'm still Deidre, but I'm not my sad. I just have a sad right now.
Yeah.
Well, I would point out that most people that are abused become the abuser in certain circumstances, and in a lot of cases when people are reacting emotionally to words that you say, more than likely it's because they're suffering from something that that hurts. So it's like the junkyard dog thing that I pointed out before. It just jumps out. The emotion just jumps out and you know. But that's where we really need to be aware of the fact that they are suffering. And so that's one of the things I think the mantras that comes out in the book, The Art of Communication, is I know you suffer. So making that statement, like in a situation like that, is probably going to take them back a little bit. But it's a good way to kind of open up that opportunity to then communicate much more effectively.
I'll admit.
You've already heard me. You already heard me.
I'll admit, I use that when I'm out, and someone is just like pushing my boundaries, because they always expect you to react with anger, and of course, that goes along with telling me what to do. If you also have an expectation for what I should do, I won't do it. I'll do the opposite. Just I don't know why. I'm not really sure why I do that, but I will go the other way.
It's called the contrarian.
Yeah. If they decide that they want to like provoke me to anger, I just go back to, it must be really difficult, like living the way that you do with so much anger. And I really get I employ the tone of voice too. And sometimes I do it not maliciously, but I know what I'm doing. Like I know that I'm messing with them. But it's still fun
Yeah.
because it catches them off guard, and they're like, "Wait, wait, you're pushing me into fields. I don't want to be in the fields. Get me away from the fields."
Hey
Yeah,
guys,
that's
can
good.
I share something with you? It'll just take like 1 or 2 minutes. It's a really cool little exercise.
Oh boy.
Is
Here
that
we go.
okay? All right.
Are we on a tangent?
So no, it's totally on point. So
Okay.
can you imagine the last person that you like totally had a conflict with that pissed you off or whatever? And I'm gonna read you something. So check this out. Just like me,
Okay.
this person woke up this morning to be here. This person is seeking happiness. This person wants to be loved. This person has looked in a mirror, trapped in their body. They have shared of themselves and have given love. They want to know their purpose. This person has had unkind thoughts about their own body, their own life. This person has experienced feelings of unity in the world. This person has felt separated and alone and is lovable.
Sometimes that reminded me of the
beautiful.
feeling of jealousy that it's very common when you've grown up traumatized. It's like this feeling because you're so isolated, no one knows how you feel. Sometimes the only way to get people to realize how you feel is to become that person, to have that reaction that allows the other person to feel the awful suffering that you're feeling. And it's really easy when you're treating someone else like that unintentionally. It's really easy to just think in your mind, well, it happened to me, I went through it, I lived, I deal with it every day. What's one day? Like, you really underestimate the damage that has been done to your we're denying it to ourselves. We're minimizing our own damage within ourselves just to feel connected to another person who has felt just as damaged. And oftentimes we're the ones facilitating that damage, especially the older and older we get. And that's really hard. That's really hard to accept, to be honest.
I saw that when I was working in the high security prisons and in the juvenile detention centers, and I was never able to see to see the participants of the projects as the bad guys, the murderers, the rapists, the whatever they did. You know, many times I didn't even know, but the picture they were portrayed as there by the wardens and by the officers, and so it was like, oh, you know, those guys, they have to be locked away, they have to be punished. And you know, even children, some of them were literally like children still, and that was just like on a different level. But like I always from the first minute when I was working with them, I saw them not only as the perpetrators of whatever they did, but I saw them as victims too. And it was so obvious to me. I was like, wow, like how, you know, how can those guys, you know, deal with them every day and not see that they're the victim at the same time and just treat them as perpetrators? It's so easy to just stamp them like that. But you know, it was so obvious, and that made me just a while ago think about the first thing that you said, Michael, was about breath and breathing. And that resonated with me a lot, because that is really the base, that is the essence of everything. That in itself is flowing all the time, just like our communication should be flowing. It is something that connects the inside with the outside, and without breathing, you know, we could not communicating with anybody else. So, and it's something also that, you know, it's interesting to think about. If it's something, are you breathing or are you being breathed, so to say? Is that something? Yeah, be breathed. Yes. You know, so that is something that brings everything together for me. And then when again I try to personalize, you know, what all of you said, and bring it into my experience and compare it to, you know, to my experience, then you know, talking about suffering, talking about asking questions, about listening, that's like in a capoeira context. You know, when I go inside the capoeira circle and I play, then breath is also is basically, you know, necessary to do that. Then suffering, it's to realize that everybody that goes inside with me in that circle, and even everybody that stands around and claps and sings and plays the instruments, they all have their suffering. We all bring our suffering to that. And capoeira itself, of course, was created in a general context of suffering, because it was, founded out of that urge for freedom and rebellion, and fighting down the slave masters, basically, to free yourself physically. And it still continues today, like on all the other levels as well of seeking freedom. At least that is my perception of it. You have to ask, and you ask when playing capoeira. You don't ask with your words, but you ask through your physical expression, because it's a communication as well. It's a non-verbal communication where the different attacks and defenses are also questions and answers. So you're basically testing out, with a kick, you give somebody a question and you see if he can answer that question, and then what kind of question he's going to throw back at you. And then if that flows beautifully, then it's always like a back and forward. So it can be just in a conversation. It can't be that one somebody is only asking question, the other person is only giving answers, but it has to be balanced out. So then there's a flow on that level there. And then you were talking about to being honest, to be gentle, and to be passionate also. And that is a quality you don't always see in the capoeira harder either, because then human nature comes out, and not everybody is on the gentle and on the compassionate side. But if we can, with awareness, bring that into our conversation, into our communication, or like in my case, in my example, into a capoeira harder, then that becomes something beautiful, because I'm able to give kicks and throw attacks and give also defenses, but to do it from a point of compassion. There's gentleness even in the quickest and possibly most devastating attack, because I will throw it only at somebody who I know, who is able of getting out of it. And then it's a play, it's a game. It's not something where purposefully try to hurt somebody, but it becomes a game at a higher level, and you still have that compassion in that game. And then it can be gentle as well, because you shake your hand before and after, and you demonstrate respect and gentleness to the other person. And practice, of course, is also essential for it, because the more you practice, the better the flow is, and the better you are in balance, not only with yourself but also with the other, and with everybody who is around. And then the last one was working together.
Working together.
Without working together, there's no capoeira game. There's no meaningful, compassionate conversation. And what would be, if we're not working together? We would not be here right now if we would not be working together.
Yeah, touching on what you said about the gentle, I think there's one other thing in this book that's really powerful, and that is the difference between communicating in a nourishing way versus a toxic way, and being nourishing, and how we talk to other people, and how we use our words to affect other people in a nourishing way, in a positive way, where we can change people's perspectives so quickly by just how we approach people and what we say to them, and how powerful that is. And unfortunately, we're conditioned, and we're practiced into just being you know almost neutral 95% of the time, because of what? Because of conditioning.
Because we have
Because we
to
would have
play
never experienced
safe.
it. Yeah, we were not trained to even do that. And like I admire so much, like Agnieszka, like when you do the face reading, and so it's like, wow, that was something that really came to my mind. Like when I was giving the example earlier, working with the children, and I noticed that I was using words and that they did not have the words to respond. But then also, like at a later stage, I noticed that, well, what is missing in me? Oh wow, there was this little boy, and he was standing there like for 10 minutes, and then he didn't participate. And well, I had 50 others, but like, oh, how come when I was talking to this girl, and like she was rolling her eyes, and I didn't get that first, and I could have picked up on her feeling, or how she felt, or what was going on there. And those were things I was not trained to look at, and I did not develop. So I developed my words, maybe through my education or to the school, but I did not develop like a kind of sense and a feeling of picking up on other things, of expressions and of body language. So that then became like I noticed that problem, but then it triggered me to look for a solution, and to train myself to improve on that level as well, because that's like probably even the biggest part of communication, right? The one that is beyond words.
On some level, we all know. So just one sec. And for some level, we all know what face reading means, what people are thinking, what they're feeling, through the muscle systems in the face, but we don't often have words for the impressions that we get.
I feel like coming from the trauma side, I say we, as in like anyone who has been through a traumatic experience, we get a little arrogant because we spend a lot of time reading people. We can be really good at it, but we don't need to be so arrogant to think that we know how to read everybody, that you can tell every single person, because there are subconscious little signs that you don't even pick up on, you didn't even realize you were reading, and it you were only taught, you only know how to read the people that you've been exposed to. So don't be so arrogant to think that everything that you're picking up on, you know what it means. Be aware that you're picking up on something, but you're picking up on what they're either unable to hide or they just don't want to.
Well, how can you hide micro expressions?
I try to be surprised. I try to hold that and go, okay, I know how I'm feeling. It could be this, awful thing, but I'm just going to sit on it and just going to leave it, and I'm going to find out, it could be something, what if it's something really cool? What if I learn something about somebody? What if they tell me something really deep and they're going through stuff? It's like, it's this beautiful curiousness that kind of can develop.
Also the ability to discern, right? To discriminate, so to say, between the because sometimes you might be picking up words, so your ears are hearing words, but if you really go within and you feel, from your heart, it's like, okay, those words, they might sound harsh or so, but you feel that there's, that's not what's being communicated from an emotional level. Sometimes, if I talk loud or harsh, like, with one of my children, for example, because they're doing something that is dangerous, or whatever it is, then I'm communicating like a harshness or like a sternness, like with my words, but still from my heart, I still be there, like, like I still love you and I'm doing it for you. And I think people can pick up on that. But it's the ability to discriminate, really, like what, are you picking up? Is it just your mind, that's filtering out something that you want to hear, or that you also, because of past conditioning,
that was in my mind.
I'm holding it in here. I'm shaking because I'm trying to hold it in. He's talking beautiful stuff right now, and you ruined it.
It was my computer.
She held it together. You both held it together.
Oh my god!
That's right.
I'm like, they're bubbling. I'm like, here it goes.
I was trying so hard. I'm like, no, just don't look at it. Look at the roof. Look away.
I started over there, like, taking deep breaths. She's like,
that's right. I was shaking.
All right. Well, we're closing in on the end of the show here. I did want to, because we've got a 2-part segment. For the next segment, there's a little bit of a activity that the audience can do and we can do as well. And that is number 1, attempt to improve communications with at least one person.
Attempt or practice?
Over the next week. No, just make the attempt to improve communication. If you're having a circumstance where you feel like, oh man, I could definitely improve this situation, or maybe you just, well, you know what, I'm going to say some nice things to people today. Any of those kind of things. Or if you just want to take the opportunity to evaluate your own communication skills and identify where you're at and how you feel about where you're at with your own level of communication. Are you practicing enough? Are you doing the things that we talked about? Are you taking a breath before you address somebody that's got you angry? Are you considering, that people do, the abusers are usually the abused as well? And have you considered what they might have suffered to get them to the point that they're triggered by whatever it is they're triggered by?
Not that excuses their behavior, but it does help you understand what happened, why it happened, and give you clarity so you can move on. I'd like to leave everybody with my favorite quote from the best wizard of all time, Gandalf. And he says, "Do not be so quick to deal out judgment." He actually says, do not be so quick to deal out judgment and death, but I felt that was a little bit too much. We're not talking about death here. So, judgment. Don't be so quick to deal it out.
So the other thing we got to address is the logical fallacy. Do we have the logical fallacy thing prepared?
We do. We do. It's right here. Oh, it's on the screen right now. So we have a little donkey, and we have a prosperous dictatorship and is an educated dictatorship. Poster that the donkey's looking at. And the caption on the bottom is, my opponent believes that we should spend more on education. Do you know who else thinks that? The dictator himself. So what is it about? It's about flattening somebody to one opinion and correlating that one opinion with something unwanted. Right?
And it's done all the time. You see it every day.
Right. So if you share
that's a logical fallacy.
You share one aspect or one belief that the person may not believe in, and everything you say is discounted because the person doesn't believe in that one thing that you believe in. Like, for example, oh, I don't like to drink milk. Oh, you're one of those. Oh, that way you can't really tell me anything about herbs that can cure my whatever malady because you don't drink milk. And because of that, I can't trust you because I drink milk.
Or if you say anything against or questioning vaccines, oh, you're one of those anti-vaxxers. Yeah, okay. You're crazy. Stay away from me.
You're not supposed to be driving a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the level it gets at.
Well,
but that's the level.
I get that
problem. I get that
I'm
one with narcolepsy all the time. People are like, should you be driving? I'm like, I have a perfect driving record. Thank you, guys. Just because I have a neurological disorder does not mean that I can't drive. I'm sorry that the rest of us fall asleep all the time.
Apparently.
But
yeah, but you can't drive. But you do.
Yeah. So
I can't imagine what's going on in their brains. Like that, it must be like short wiring or something.
Well, some people with narcolepsy can't drive. It depends on the thing.
Some people with diabetes can't drive either, but that doesn't mean that everybody with diabetes doesn't get a license.
It's true.
Man, how quickly we can get on a tangent.
We're talking about the fallacy, right?
No, I think we're talking about driving with narcolepsy.
No. The fallacy is that everybody with narcolepsy falls asleep while driving.
Or like,
that's a good example.
If you're from Texas, people used to ask me like, oh, do you have like an oil drill in your backyard? I was like, yeah, and we also ride our horses to school every day. Like, just because you think one thing is associated with this does not mean that every single person who's associated with believes that or does that.
I do remember when I first came to Canada, somebody asked me, oh, you're from Poland. That's like a backwards country. Do you guys have hairdressers back there? I was like, that's your question? Do we have hairdressers? A lot of people thought I lived in igloos and took a sled to school.
Don't you own a herd of reindeer?
In Poland.
Wait.
Oh, no, that's in Canada.
Are you telling me that Deirdre doesn't have like a whole bunch of kangaroos just hanging out in her backyard?
Oh yeah, and
absolutely.
A whole flock of
it's so efficient. Oh my gosh, it is so efficient, you guys.
And did I tell you that although I'm from Germany, I'm not related at all to Hitler?
No.
What?
That's so new news to me. Really? No. I don't believe you.
Well, with all that said, this is the conclusion of our show. Remember, next week we've got a Dennis hosting the show, and he's going to be talking about finding freedom, a little bit of a different take on things. And that's Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And so keep that in mind. I really appreciate the discussion we had. I thought we really covered a lot of territory. We definitely, I think, broached the idea of awareness of, communication being something that we got to pay more attention to. We've got to improve. It's certainly one of the skills that we can have that when we improve it, we get dramatic
results,
positive effects from it. And so it's certainly something to consider, spending some time on.
Better communication changes the playing field. Totally.
Amen.
Culture of
Amen.
excellence changes the playing field.
Yes.
Amen.
All right, so it's time to play the outro.
With that said,
right?
I guess we say bye.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, 3 times a week.
Bye, everybody.
3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We have to start those numbers for all the time zones, but we'll figure that out maybe one day. All right, I'm going to play the outro now. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming. You're awesome. Have a lovely weekend.